Before taking office in 2024, Ishiba Shigeru, former Japanese Prime Minister, floated the idea of an Asian NATO, a collective defense pact that could echo Europe's security model. Beijing condemned the idea as a return to, quote, Cold War blocs. Washington labelled it as premature, and India distanced itself. And before her own rise, Takaichi Sanae pushed for a regional security coalition that included Taiwan, India and New Zealand as partners. What security concerns lie behind these calls? Is Asia ever likely to form a NATO-style alliance? And does the cautionary tale of SEATO provide clues for any alternative framework? Finally, why is such a concept of collective defence in Asia so controversial? And how would such a style of alliance differ from what is already taking shape in the region? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. Joining me today are Liu Dehai, National Zhengzhou University College of International Affairs Adjunct Distinguished Professor. Also, we have Gemont Lalari, Institute for National Defense and Security Research visiting scholar. He's also a retired U.S. Air Force Foreign Area Officer specializing in irregular warfare missile defense. And we have Joseph Tsai, National Zhengzhou University Political Science Professor. As debate grows about coalition defense and security in Asia, did you know that a Cold War-era alliance once tried to bring collective security to Asia? SEATO, or Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, was created in 1954 during the Cold War and brought together 8 countries: the Philippines, Thailand, Pakistan, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, the United Kingdom and France. South Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos were classed as observer states, which, however, lay within the protected area. But noticeably, most Southeast Asian nations were not members, and while SEATO was established to protect the region from communist expansion, it became closely tied to the US justification for the Vietnam War, which eventually damaged SEATO's credibility. Compared to NATO, SEATO lacked any clear commitment, like NATO's Article 5, and members couldn't agree on a shared threat. Following the end of the Vietnam War and the emergence of ASEAN, which was based on dialogue rather than military action, SEATO was disbanded. Gemont, how would you characterize the failure of SEATO?
You know, at first it probably had a good intention, trying to replicate NATO, but as you mentioned in the beginning, there were lots of problems with it besides the consensus. Maybe one is the internal disagreement. For example, when India and Pakistan went to war, Pakistan wanted SEATO to intervene and it didn't work. So because it was more about an anti-communist focus than a India-Pakistan focus. So these kind of problems persisted, and I think the death knell of the program was the end of the Vietnam War.
Okay. Professor Liu, what's your view? Do you think SEATO could have been successful, or was it always doomed to fail because of the conditions?
Of course, U.S. was the rising power. On the other hand, the U.K. and France were declining power. So in that case, U.K. and France tend not to involve too much in this part of the world. On the other hand, the U.S. tend to move forward to take over France's job, such as Vietnam. For example, the Laos case, France and UK would like to send troops under the SEATO. However, U.S. said no, the vice versa. But U.S. wants to send troops to Vietnam. UK and France refused to cooperate with the United States.
Right. Let's go now to today. The security environment is changing fast. Over the past 4 decades, China has engineered the biggest military build-up the world has seen outside of wartime, with no sign of it abating. The PLA Navy has surpassed the US Navy in hull number, with Chinese shipbuilding capable of building a British Royal Navy every 4 years. Most concerningly, there is evidence from satellite imagery that China's nuclear capabilities are accelerating without the transparency of other major powers like the US and Russia. Furthermore, with its military advantage, China has adopted an increasingly aggressive and expansionist posture in the East and South China Seas, the Taiwan Strait, as well as into the Western Pacific and Indian Ocean. Gemont, let me come to you now. So as we mentioned at the beginning, Ishiba and Takaichi, Ishiba is not a right wing, from the right wing of Japanese politics. But they both say that what we currently have is not enough. Why is that the case?
Because the democratic nations were under the false impression that doing business with China would tamper down its aggressive activity in the region, and it would become part of the commonwealth of countries that get along to go along and part of the free and open Indo-Pacific. It didn't work. Instead, China invested in its military continuously, 7% every year for many years. And compounding interest means that China now has a very huge capacity. As you mentioned, the number of ships is greater than the United States. It's growing its nuclear weapons, so it's a behemoth, and no individual country in the region can defend themselves against China.
Not even the United States? Is that the difference?
United States and China probably, equals in many different areas, their strengths and weaknesses, but the United States has obligations to countries in Asia, and the United States is an Indo-Pacific country, and so it's not going away. And so the time has come to reassess this idea.
And Professor Tsai, in terms of the security situation today versus, SEATO's 1950s, what are the crucial similarities or differences?
Yeah, because in that time, the big elephant was Soviet Union, but this time it's China. So it wouldn't be much different. Okay, the thing is, and also thanks to China, because China's assertive, aggressive actions toward neighboring countries. So it's ripe for 4 countries, especially we talk about Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and the United States, to band together, right? Because right now they do have some reciprocal access agreements, but the thing is it's not enough. They want to have more. They want to formalize we call the entente stuff. They want to have a formal alliance.
So what do you mean is a mutual defense treaty?
Something like that. But it's not like Asian NATO, because just a couple countries. It's not a pan-regional organization like NATO. It's smaller, but it's more, it's mini-lateral stuff. So it's very important because the threat is different. It's imminent.
Professor Liu, so we talked about the similarities. China has basically replaced Russia, both of them autocracies. But what is the difference in China as the enemy versus Russia?
The biggest enemy now is China. Why? We need to know. If you want to know the differences between the SEATO era and nowadays, that is economy. Economization of international relations. All right. In the past, the Soviet Union did not have very strong economic linkage with our side, democratic camp. But nowadays, China has very strong economic interdependence with our region, all the democratic countries, including the United States. So as a result, in particular region in ASEAN, we talk about ASEAN countries, they have to think about the 2 things at the same time. In the past, security alone. But nowadays, they need to think 2 things: economic interest plus the security interest. As a result, we can find out that in the beginning of this century, they tended to ally with the United States strategically, while enhance the economic interaction with China. But now, of course, the recent decade, China and U.S. cannot get along well, and then started to push each other strategically, strategic tit for tat. Right. As a result, ASEAN countries have to make a choice.
Professor Liu was saying about the calculation, the calculus is ever more complicated, a lot more complicated than the 1950s. Now, when it comes to Taiwan, of course, it is the most urgent security issue in this region. So, if we were to think about an alliance with a mutual defense treaty, should Taiwan be in or should Taiwan be out?
I think in the big scheme of things, Taiwan has to play a role in the first island chain. It's the key to China's access into the Pacific and its representation of power. So initially, I believe the better strategy would be to create maybe one or two small trilateral alliances that could later form into maybe a larger one. So, for example, U.S., Japan, Korea, focusing on North Korea and possibly some aspect of China. U.S., Japan, and the Philippines focusing obviously on China, with Taiwan having some role. But that role would have to increase because as the threat increases, Taiwan's threat to Taiwan is growing. So, in order to avoid, to giving China an excuse to do something, Taiwan's role should be muted, but still play some part so that it's prepared to participate with other military in defending itself.
But if it's not formally a part of this mutual defense treaty, then doesn't the alliance avoid the most pressing security issue?
I think you can get around it. For example, Taiwan currently does exercises with its Coast Guard with Japan and the Philippines and the United States and many countries in the Indo-Pacific. And China doesn't seem to complain. So there are lots of different things. The United States is enhancing its military with Taiwan. And Taiwan is going to be participating in exercises in the United States with other countries. So it's actually happening, but it's not formalized.
So what are the arguments against formalizing? Perhaps it's more that there's negative impacts to that.
So the basic reason is China. We don't want to give an excuse to China to invade or blockade Taiwan. So in order to avoid that, we can still proceed in a way that doesn't trip that wire. That's my argument.
It's a little bit like Ukraine, though, isn't it? I mean, maybe I should bring Professor Tsai in. The argument for Ukraine to be inside NATO is because we don't want another Russian attack on Ukraine.
Yeah, but the thing is that you cannot just sit idle. You have to do something. Otherwise, China is going to dominate the region. So you cannot just say, okay, maybe we shouldn't provoke China but weakness is provocative.
How about what we had said earlier about, South Vietnam's status, Cambodia's status? They were observers, but their territory was within the protected area.
Yeah, but the thing is that Taiwan can be protective aim of SEATO. Taiwan doesn't have to join the SEATO. The thing is that, but it's very important because for Japan, they try to build up defense in Yonaguni Island. It's very close to Taiwan. And the Philippines try to build up Marvilis Island. It's also close to Taiwan. So they try to connect the dots and lines and domains. Even without the formal treaty stuff, still they are doing a lot of things going on. So it's very important.
Sure. So this brings me back to the first question, which was, if we all think that this is effective, then why do we have voices like Ishiba and Takaichi who are calling for something more, Professor Liu?
I think that's what Takaichi is trying to do.
Okay, perhaps not Takaichi then. Ishiba, what are the limitations of what we have currently?
But Ishiba was very shrewd. Once he became prime minister, he became very, strategic ambiguity, back to the traditional Japanese way, I might. But not Takaichi. So Takaichi, once she became the prime minister, and then she started to talk about anything happened to Taiwan means happening to Japan. So that's exactly what we were discussing about this. You see, it's up to China. China perceive this as a threat or not.
Okay.
China, want to tolerate or not.
So this is the big question, isn't it? Which we'll deal with in the next section. How far should we allow China to basically dictate? Now let's deal with the arguments against an alliance in Asia. Despite its unprecedented and secretive military buildup, China has railed against a defensive Asian NATO, framing such a concept as in reintroducing quote, Cold War blocs and being a destabilizing force for the region. It successfully harmed the prospects of a NATO office opening in Japan in 2023, most notably by pressuring France, which sought to build a closer relationship with China at the time. Gimon, let me ask you then. So what toolkit, what strategies has Beijing used specifically against an Asian NATO?
It's used...
or a NATO in Asia?
It's used several tactics. One is Asia for Asians mantra, which tries to push away the United States and European countries from getting involved in Asia. Although, ironically, it's the same phrase that the Japanese used during World War II to talk about their Asia for Asia. So I find it ironic that the Communist Party of China is using the same propaganda. The second issue is more about trying to frame the involvement of outside countries as a colonial aspect or a hegemon aspect. And these are all psychological framing to try to keep its opposition, mainly the United States and some European countries, out of Asia.
And it was one of the factors, I believe, to contributing to SEATO's demise as well, this sort of post-colonialism.
Well, yes, but it was probably more real then, but I don't think it's colonialism now. I don't think
But they are still drawing on that. I mean, they're referring to Cold War era.
Oh, of course,
yeah.
they like to do that, but it's selective. They choose the stories that meet their objectives. For example, when Xi met Trump on the phone call, the outbrief was, yes, we helped stop the Japanese in Asia. Well, the Communist Party of China didn't really fight much against the Japanese. It was the Kuomintang or the ROC forces that were doing it. So again, it's all twisted. But their basic arguments are false.
Right. Professor Tsai, we see there that obviously China's trying to drive that wedge between different Asian powers and sort of draw on the fears of the Cold War. And this is a political scare label, isn't it, to use Cold War era, even just to say this is your destabilizing force in the region. Let's talk now about this debate over provocation versus deterrence. Arguably, China wins this debate. I mean, we all three panelists, perhaps not you so much, Professor Tsai, all said that this is because China says that it's crossing a red line.
Yeah, they always use this kind of strategy because they are always angry or furious about this. But the thing is that we are not going to bury our head in the sand because we have to do something. Otherwise, we cannot prevent China's revisionist schemes on the Indo-Pacific. So the key issue is deterrence. We have to beef up deterrence.
So why not go for an Asian-style NATO?
Because it's very complicated because of the geography and a lot of countries, they have different interests. Some of them even hedge with China, right? So at the outset, we should start the core four countries. Like I say, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and the United States. We start from there. It's not from scratch because already something there. We have to build up on this kind of foundation and keep going.
I want to draw you on this issue, that we've spoken about. China insisting this is crossing a red line, insisting that this is provocation. I mean, isn't it just a diversion from its own aggression, its own military build-up? Yeah, and a justification for it at the same time. Yeah,
the thing is that they started instability and conflict, but they try to blame you because you crossed the red line. But they started, always, they try to have that kind of aggressive actions, especially to Japan, to the Philippines, also to Taiwan. So they try to say, this is your fault, you crossed the red line. Always the same scenario. So this is not right. We should do something. We cannot just say, okay, because we crossed the red line. No, we are the victim.
Don't blame the victim.
Yeah.
Gimon.
I think that the U.S. and some of the countries that you mentioned could create an alliance structure, a very strong structure, where the 3 or 4 countries and then communicate to China that if they dare to attack Taiwan, Taiwan will be added as an ally of that alliance, and therefore all those countries will commit to helping defend Taiwan. I think that's a great statement. And the Taiwan Relations Act even mentions that if China conducts a blockade or any kind of military action against Taiwan, the U.S. will break relations with China, and it reserves the right to intervene. So all these things, I think, are tools that can be used by this kind of alliance.
Yeah, sort of like a double layer of deterrence. Professor Liu, do you think that would work?
Oh, I think the Trump administration has worked out an even more innovative way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that is why when he was at the Busan APEC summit, he announced he would allow South Korea to possess the nuclear-powered submarine. It seems now marine powers are not in a very well defensive line. In that case, allowed South Korea first, could followed by Japanese, because Takaichi already mentioned about that, and then Australia already through the AUKUS. So this is, I think, it's a very important warning signal to China when it comes to the deterrence. This is the first step, and then of course nuclear-powered submarine doesn't mean you have the strategic nuclear capacity.
So you're saying that the nuclear deterrent actually means that alliance, the Mutual Defense Treaty, it does away with the need for that, the nuclear deterrence.
Sorry to say that. This is talk about this kind of multilateral security mechanism for Donald Trump is not his major concern.
Yeah,
he believes U.S. is the most powerful country. U.S. Is the arbitrator rather than small medium powers. People perhaps thought he made that suddenly made that decision announcement. In reality, no. I think he has worked out from a long-term perspective.
Okay. Professor Sanae, you mentioned about geography in Asia. You mentioned that as one of the reasons why an alliance couldn't work. How does that differ to Europe? How is the geography different for Europe?
Because in Asia, the geography is scattered because different countries in different areas. In Europe, you can just, it's like one Europe, right? It's very easy to identify.
So you're saying it's more easily defended?
Yeah, but the thing is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's the key issue here. And also, we keep our friends close. In the same time, we keep our enemies closer. So it's very important. Yeah.
Gaimon, we mentioned, there's Asian NATO, but there's also NATO in Asia, which is what we seem to be edging towards in 2023. Jens Stoltenberg, together with Fumio Kishida, talking about Euro-Atlantic security, how it's tied to Indo-Pacific security, and then the office which fell through. What would be the difference between NATO in Asia with, they've got those 4 non-NATO members, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand?
I don't think China likes anybody being in Asia unless they're Asian. I mean, that's as an excuse to keep everybody out. But let's be clear, the UK and France have huge interests in
Still have, yes.
Yeah, in the Indo-Pacific. France has the second largest EEZ territory in the world as part of its Pacific area. The UK has its own alliances with Australia and the five countries defense pact.
Singapore, Malaysia.
Malaysia, Singapore. The UK has 2,000 military personnel defending Brunei. The French have 20,000 troops scattered around the Indo-Pacific. And it's not for random reasons, because they have interests here. And then, of course, even Germany has a reciprocal agreement with countries in the Indo-Pacific. And these countries, especially France and the UK, are nuclear powered. All right, there's a reason that they're also active. And, Japan and the rest of the, let's say, the alliance, the bilateral alliances with the United States face, at least 3, maybe 4 nuclear-powered countries. You know, China, Russia, North Korea, and maybe even Pakistan if there's a war in the Indian Ocean, and maybe a 5th one coming, Iran. So a NATO in the Indo-Pacific is important. The NATO countries in the Indo-Pacific have their own interests beyond the U.S. interests.
But Professor Liu, final question, but do you see them essentially being scared off this expansion because of China? China says, no, I don't want this. Its provocation is destabilizing. They say, okay.
So that's his way. Donald Trump has worked out his way. And also we need to know the big difference between Biden's Indo-Pacific strategy and Trump's. Is Biden wants to build out this strengthen this kind of linkage between Asia and Europe
like
through the NATO, but not Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to focus on our region, Asia Pacific, and NATO separately.
Does that make this region safer?
It's up to Donald Trump, not us, because we can say many things, but it's up to the U.S. president. He's the most powerful state in this region. We are talking about his mindset, his strategy. That matters a lot.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Okay, thank you. Professor Liu Dehai, Gemont Lalari, and Tai Rongshang for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.